Alright, so in this video I'm going to be showing you how to measure and mix plaster. And first what you're looking at is my maquette for the plaster block that I think I want to carve. So I've got that set in place, and now I need to figure out how tall it is up against the mold of my plaster box. What you need to remember when you're trying to mix plaster is that whatever the height is that you need, half of that will be water, so plaster will double in size. So I've figured out how tall it's going to be. I've made a mark, and now I know that half of that is going to be water. It kind of fits. I kind of double checked. Right there is where I will pour water to. Now what I'm doing is I'm measuring how much water is in this milk carton. So I poured water in there, and first I'm just cutting off the top, makes it easier for me to not have anything that'll catch as I'm mixing. Now that I know that I have that much water in there, kind of double check. I measured, I poured, measured, poured out until I got it right. You know, I'm eyeballing it a little bit, but now I'm gonna try and find a container to actually mix my plaster. And it's really important not to mix your plaster in the carton that you are using as a mold. You can see that that is not enough space because plaster will double in size, so twice that amount of water and that container won't work. So I find a larger container. It helps me to be able to mix and splash, and even though it's really small at the very bottom, I have more space to actually work in. So you want to make sure you're using clean, cold water to get really good results, and water that's not disturbed. So here I am mixing my plaster. I sped it up just for our purposes here, but I'm evenly trying to toss or sprinkle the plaster over the surface of the water without disturbing the water itself. As I'm nearing the top, I slow down a little bit. I'm tapping it in the areas that seem to have more water than plaster. So I don't want a mountain of plaster in the middle. I want to try and have even layers of plaster. So I keep working with this. I can see that there's some really high peaks here, so I want to try and push some of the excess. I just use my fork that I'm going to be using to mix, and I just sort of push that and sprinkle it into those areas that seem to have more saturation. Got a little bit more to go. So I take some more plaster and just sprinkle it in those areas. This is the hardest part, to be patient. But be sure that you are taking your time with this, sprinkling in those areas. We're going to wait for the plaster and the water to absorb. And so all the little white peaks, I'm going to wait for those to be finally absorbed in the water. And I just sit and watch it turn from that white color to that sort of tan gray. I want a crumb top on top with very little slick water areas. And then I'll mix it up, and I want to mix it up very thoroughly. As you mix, you will add air bubbles to it, so in a little bit you'll see me tapping this bucket to try and get those air bubbles out. You may use your hand if you want to, but if you do mix with your hand, you'll have to wash that off. And I do not suggest putting plaster water in your sinks. That would be detrimental. So you want to wash your hands off in a separate bucket and throw that bucket outside. So this is me tapping, gently tapping it and lifting it onto the table itself. Letting all those bubbles come out, and just take your time. You want to make sure there's no air bubbles in it. Now we don't want air bubbles as we pour in, so I'll actually pour down the side of this mold. So we'll have to do the same thing that we did with the bucket, which is tap it gently on all sides until every single air bubble has been removed. You don't want air bubbles in there because it will destroy the surface that you may be trying to carve. So we want to make sure it's a nice solid block to work with when we get started. So here I am tapping and tapping, trying to get all the bubbles out, using my fork if I need to. Really trying to make sure there's a nice smooth surface on top. You can see I use my hand to scrape out the bucket. If you need to, you can use a glove and then throw the glove away. I was able to wash my hand out in a bucket and throw the water outside. Next is timing. It will take anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes for this to set up. Let it set up before you disturb it. So here I am checking. You can, I pull the edge of the cardboard carton away from it. You can see, ooh, that came away quickly. That's not something we want to have. We want to have that separation to be a lot less severe. I felt the top, it was moist. It even left a little bit of plaster on top. It will get warm, and then it will get hot, and then it'll cool down. And once it cools down, it's ready to remove. And that process may take quite a bit as well. Anything from an additional 10 to 20 more minutes. You can leave this out overnight and then peel away the carton edge. Okay, so this is looking much better. You can see that crack is not as severe. It also feels cool to the touch, and this was about 45 minutes later. So that is the end of that, and that is my block. As it's finally ready, I kind of peeled it away very slowly, and I'll show you the final results in the bottom of this video.